That's a gun!
Shots fired, Rector and John Mosberger, code 3 north.
In the first body cam, the officer goes 0 for 24, and in the second, the officer shoots what I would say is definitely a no-shoot. I'll play each video, then provide you with information that isn't rather obvious from the body cams. On February 23rd, 2024, Green Bay police responded to a road rage disturbance. It was reported that one of the individuals involved in that disturbance had brandished a firearm. An officer locates one of the involved vehicles and a short pursuit takes place. The suspect you're about to see does die, but not in the way you might be thinking. I've looked through the crime scene photos and read over roughly 600 pages of reports and findings, so I'll be able to provide you with information you wouldn't otherwise know.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Suspect hit! I got shots fired! Get me some people over here now!
You got a copy in some area, send them.
Man black or native, wearing a cream-colored sweater. He went in towards the house area. Send me everybody you got. He's still armed. I got no eyes on. He went to the west. Get out of here! Get out of here! The red vehicle is in the middle of the road. Suspect went west of it. Give me some units up to me right now.
I need more units and one. David Razor House.
Block off West Mason. The next unit come up here. Block off West Mason and Greenridge. Don't let any traffic through. The suspect's gonna be anywhere here to the west.
911, where are you?
914 Greenridge. I'm behind a truck. I'm behind cover.
All right.
Yes, he's the one who's shooting at me. I'm okay.
You don't have you?
I'm good. Hands up! Hands up! It's coming towards me! I got at least a dozen rounds off. Move it up!
Have units are moving up.
I got this out! I got down here!
The suspect actually died not because the officer hit him, but because he shot himself in the head. There were 3 cement shell casings found next to the suspect's body, and there was no indication that the suspect had fired at the officer from where his body was found. Before we get into the tactics and decision-making portion, I think it's important to go over what the officer was seeing and feeling from his perspective. The officer stated that he came up from behind the steering wheel and he could still see the male subject pointing the black color handgun in his direction. The officer then discharged his handgun through the windshield of his patrol vehicle in the direction of the male subject to end the threat that was going to potentially end his life. When he was asked if he was in fear for his life, he responded 100% yes. The officer was unsure if the male subject fired any rounds at him. The officer was also uncertain how many rounds he had fired from his duty gun. If you see anything in the video, good or bad, that I don't talk about, you can put that in the comment section. So first of all, the officer gets credit for just locating the vehicle at all. He was heading in the direction of the disturbance. He probably only had, or at least he only saw when he noticed the vehicle, a red sedan going in the direction away from where the disturbance was occurring. And so he turns around to attempt to stop the vehicle and the vehicle flees. indicating that you're probably on the right vehicle. Short pursuit takes place, and as the red vehicle comes to a stop, the officer is attempting to stop his vehicle as well, and he ends up about 20 yards or so away from where the suspect ends up firing from, which I think is a pretty good distance and is reasonable. It never hurts to try and give yourself a little bit more space. I would, however, encourage you to turn your vehicle to the left to provide yourself a little bit more cover so that you can plan for these situations. This alignment with the officer's vehicle and the suspect's vehicle is basically what they teach, essentially offset the vehicle and turn your wheel. I would encourage you instead to angle your vehicle more to the left. And the reason for that is that if this becomes a situation that you're involved in, you can get yourself to a nearer point of cover, your engine block or some of your vehicle, faster as soon as you step out of the vehicle versus giving yourself basically your door, which oftentimes isn't ballistic anyways, to try and protect you as you're stepping out of your vehicle. So if we can angle our vehicle a little bit to the left, we can put more material, more metal, more of our vehicle between us and the threat, and that's what we want to try to do. Now, the officer said he wasn't sure if the suspect fired at him or not, at least in the moment, and the suspect fired at least a couple rounds because you can hear the suspect's gun discharge, and then after that, while the officer is firing, one round enters the officer's windshield from the suspect. That round travels into the officer's passenger side headrest and fragments into the headrest. I know you have all heard me say when you're confronted with an immediate threat, the priority is how fast can we put accurate rounds on that threat. And that is true in this situation as well. However, the only thing that you can guarantee when shooting through windshields is that you can't guarantee anything. Again, this suspect is approximately 20 yards away. He's mostly static. We'll just call it that. All of the things that they teach you or try to tell you to do when shooting through your windshield goes out the window when it's a real world situation. This is proven over and over again in body cameras, time and time again. You can't shoot through the same hole. It's just not a thing that you're going to at least intentionally do. And as you can see, the officer's windshield, there's just rounds all over the windshield. There's a number of fragments from the officer's rounds or his bullets inside of his vehicle, which is something that is likely going to happen as well, especially if you're shooting hollow points, which means those rounds are not doing anything for you once they exit your windshield and get a certain distance away from your vehicle. So you just can't guarantee hits. You have no idea where your rounds are going. And that is something that is observed here. A number of these rounds enter into a vehicle beyond where the suspect is parked in the driveway. A number of these rounds also go into a residence on the same side of the street where the suspect is as well, actually going through the outside of the house into the inside of the house, which becomes problematic. So all of these rounds are not doing anything for you. And what I say is, why would we spend time doing something that we don't know will work when we can spend a smaller amount of time focusing on getting ourselves to something that we know will work, which is clearing our muzzle? Officers' hit factor percentage of the rounds they do fire is somewhere between 15 and 35% on the street of the rounds that they do fire, making contact anywhere on a person. Does that percentage go up or does it go down when we put barriers in between our muzzle and the threat? So if that can be avoided, that's what we want to do. So in this situation here, we're approaching this guy. He's getting out of his vehicle. If you're angling your vehicle correctly, you're already prioritizing and expecting that something like this will happen. And so that when it does, you're not caught off guard. In your mind, you're telling yourself, I've seen this before. I was expecting this to happen. And you're just going through your process of getting out of your vehicle, putting as much of your vehicle between yourself and the threat. If we angle our vehicle correctly, we can get behind our vehicle while utilizing as much of that vehicle as cover as we can. This is a photo of a buddy of mine who got into an engagement from his vehicle on some robbery suspects, and he had very similar results. He helps me teach part of my high-risk vehicle encounters class, or teach the class in and of itself, where he discusses his personal experiences. And in that class, we spend a portion of that class exposing officers to the inconsistencies of shooting through your windshield and why I teach officers to prioritize clearing your muzzle so we can actually stop the threat faster. In his case, just like this officer's case, a number of fragments from his bullets were found in his vehicle, in his truck for months after this incident. He actually engaged one suspect on one side of a vehicle that was in front of him and another suspect that jumped out in that same vehicle directly in front of him. Probably a no more than 10-yard engagement and wasn't able to hit either of the suspects. Now, I've actually tested shooting through your windshield in situations that more closely replicate real life, and it turns out what we know is true is that you can't guarantee hits. And I didn't utilize the most basic officer. I utilized the officers with the most training on the department to see if they could accomplish this at distances of only 7 yards, and they were still missing the target because the things that they tell you to account for in a high stress, high stimulus situation is not something you're going to resort to. Most cops don't train to shoot through their windshield, and I don't even advise that you do it a lot because you can't get predictable outcomes. We train something over and over again so that we can get the results that we're expecting to get. When you start adding variables into shooting through your windshield, you start to find out, well, I can't hit that target, and that becomes a problem. I have a lot of information on shooting through windshields. I'm not going to go over that in this video because it'd be hours long. You're just going to have to get that on the channel over time. However, there is a list of negative consequences for engaging through your windshield, and if you can clear your muzzle, the only thing that you have to worry about is marksmanship. Shooting through your windshield is not marksmanship. Driving by a threat and pointing your gun out your side window and shooting without, the proper grip, without aligning your sights, and just for a hope and prayer, that's not marksmanship. All of this shooting, and I'll get into the rifle portion of why I don't think that was a marksmanship problem either, is a decision-making problem. It's a physiological response problem, a response to stress. None of this has anything to do with marksmanship. Before the officer gets out of his patrol vehicle and deploys with his rifle, he actually ditches his handgun onto his passenger side floorboard, and you can see his handgun is at slide lock. Obviously, we want to try to retain our weapon systems because you don't know when you might need those. The officer stated that he engaged the subject because the subject still had the handgun. He posed a serious threat to other officers and citizens in the area, and that all makes complete sense. The officer also stated that he had not turned on his patrol rifle's EOTech sight, and with patrol rifle's iron sights, fired an estimated 2 rounds. Well, we know that he fired more than 2 rounds. That's just what he perceived that he did. And if we actually draw a line from his front sight post to where his rear sights should be, I don't believe that they align at all, and I'm not sure what configuration this rear sight is. Maybe somebody knows and can put it in the comments, but it just doesn't look like from where his rear sights are seated that he could have actually used his rear sights at all. Now, someone might argue, well, you could flip them up and you can flip them down. Yeah, that's probably true, but I took some snapshots throughout his interaction with his rifle outside of the car, and his iron sights are in the same configuration. So I believe that he probably fired these rounds without any sights at all. I know you've heard that cliche phrase, being comfortable with chaos, and what that actually means is being able to perform in high stress, high stimulus situations. So although these other things are going on around us, there's chaos being invited into our environment, not allowing that chaos to attach to our emotion and our performance to degrade because we are so overcome with the physiological responses to stress. This Austin police officer attempts to stop this suspect for jaywalking. It turns into a foot pursuit, which turns into the officer kind of shooting the suspect, and then the suspect also kind of shooting himself.
You're detained right now. Walk over there.
What?
We're crossing the street without a crosswalk. Go walk over there.
Apologize, sir. Look, man,
I ain't looking for an apology. Come over here right now before I put you in handcuffs.
Sir, please listen to me.
I ain't listening to this. Over here.
Sir, I apologize, all right?
Come over here right now.
I had to get to the hospital.
Get over here right now.
Look at my arm, man. I swear to you.
Stop.
I'm sorry.
Dude, I ain't looking for an
Sorry.
apology.
I'm sorry. I fucking do know, but I'm sorry, man.
Take
I'm
off.
sorry.
Lopez is running.
Alright, I'm on one.
Southbound on Jones into a parking garage. Stop. Get your head out of here.
Running back towards Walmart. He has a purple sweater, khaki pants on.
He's on Rector, going towards the ditch.
I'm gonna you up. You're gonna get tased, bro. I'm gonna tase you. Get the on the ground. There, get up there, get up there. He has a gun!
Shots fired, Rector and John Mosberger, code 3, clear, open north. 350, officers okay?
Now, I know some people are going to say it's just jaywalking. It's no different than a traffic stop, not using your turn signal, or driving at night without your headlights. They're all Class C violations, and officers use Class C violations as investigative stops, not because they necessarily want to write you a ticket for the thing that you did, but because they want to interact with you. They want to check your ID and maybe see if you have warrants and see where the stop leads them into finding a higher level crime. That being said, stopping homeless people, perceivably, is not something I'm personally interested in because homeless people generally are not very clean, and that means that I have to kind of touch all over them, touch all over their stuff, and if you're going to search them or arrest them, you not only have to go through all of their belongings, which oftentimes are not clean, but you're also going to have to do something with all of their property, which is just like not a fun process typically. I've talked about this before. When I chase after suspects, I typically do that with my gun out because I want to be prepared for the engagement. Why would I intentionally try to place myself farther behind the curve? One of the problems with officers is that they believe that a taser or a CED is going to be the thing that solves their problem. And then just like you kind of have here, where now you have your taser in your hand and now you're transitioning your taser to your support hand, drawing your handgun and shooting one-handed, which isn't ideal. Don't assume that a taser is the thing that you are going to need. The suspect does pull a gun. There's no indication that he actually points it at officers, which maybe isn't all that important. As the officer is in this position here, up on the top side of the canal, the suspect is running by at a sprint approximately 10 yards away. The suspect is bladed, the officer is bladed, and he only has his handgun in one hand. That's because maybe he didn't have a solid concrete place to place his taser. Maybe he couldn't get it back in the holster. But again, we can avoid having our taser in our hand, period. Or if we're up on the embankment and the suspect is running away from us, you can just drop it right there, grip your handgun with two hands, and then before you move, you can pick your taser back up. Obviously, you want to be careful doing that when you're in close proximity to suspects or other people because you don't want them to grab it. But obviously, when we're engaging a target, we want to do that as close to a strong application of the fundamentals of marksmanship as possible. And we do that by gripping our handgun with two hands. So the officer engages the suspect 11 times, misses with one hand. As the suspect is running underneath the bridge, the officer fires an additional 2 rounds and he misses. So now we're at 13 rounds. Then what you see is the officer transitioning from one side of the canal to the other side. He gets up on top of the bridge. And whenever you're using force as an officer, that force is looked at under the reasonable officer standard. So would a reasonable officer in that officer's position do what he did? And what you can see here is that the suspect, if he ever was homicidal, has turned into a suicidal person because quite clearly the handgun is pointed at his own head. Now, would a reasonable officer in this officer's position do what he did? And I think the answer is obviously no. And I believe that because there's 2 other officers who are also looking at the suspect and are not engaging the suspect and are giving him commands. Are there situations where you could see something other officers don't see because of your vantage point and that could change? Absolutely. But quite clearly, that's not the situation here. Many officers have been arrested and charged with murder, manslaughter because they shoot a person who is only a danger to themselves. I guarantee you these other officers on the scene at least talked amongst themselves and were like, I don't know why he did that. It doesn't make sense. A reasonable officer in that position would not do what he did, in my opinion. You can let me know what you think about that in the comments. But the thing that is maybe saving the officer, I guess, from there being an issue is that what was reported, maybe from the autopsy or the police department's findings, that the subject shot himself. Now, the officer did hit the subject 1 time in the chest, so the officer went 1 for 16, and it's reported that the subject actually shot himself when the officer shot him in the chest. So I guess technically the suspect killed himself. If you saw something I didn't see or have an opinion, make sure you're putting that in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do that by feeding the algorithm down below. And if you're not subscribed yet, it would be cool if you were.